Hey there, welcome to this episode of In the Shop with Scott. This video is going to cover 2 weeks worth of work. They were light weeks with Easter and some other activities going on, but the mini canoe is done, seats are installed, did some different cutting board stuff. Also got these mini canoe paddles made, so that thing's ready to hit the water soon. Hope you enjoy the video. I started off by using the laser to add my logo to the cutting board I finished in the previous video. I think it looks pretty good. To prepare for weaving the canoe seats, I soaked a couple pieces of caning in a bucket of water. Once the caning was pliable, I began weaving the seats. To not overcomplicate this, I only made the horizontal and vertical rows, leaving out the diagonals. While the caning was drying, I moved on to cleaning up the walnut slabs I planed down a couple weeks ago, removing the remaining bark and smoothing over any bumps. The seats were ready to install. I made a couple marks, then rough cut to length. Using a rasp, I took a little off at a time until I got a good fit. I applied some CA glue to the edge of the seat frames to attach it to the gunnels. Then sprayed the accelerator so it would cure quickly. Then the process was repeated for the stern seat. I got back to working on the maple and walnut cutting board I prepped and glued last week. A couple passes through the plane on each side to ensure the face was smooth. The mini canoe isn't complete without a pair of paddles. I ripped down a very small piece of ash for the paddle shaft and some cedar for the blade and grips. I also transitioned to using the chest harness for the camera to try a different point of view. The ash and cedar strips were carefully cut to length on the miter saw. This might have been easier using a handsaw. Using painter's tape as clamps, I added glue and set these aside to dry. I've received some questions on how hard it is to replace the sandpaper on the drum sander. It's a rather easy process. There are spring clamps at each end of the drum that the ends of the paper go under. I normally have 100 grit paper to clean up any ridges from the planer, but also use 60 grit when working on end grain boards instead of using the planer. Onto the table saw and the crosscut sled to square up the ends of this board before using the stop block to rip even strips. I like using the micro jig gripper once the pieces get small to keep my fingers away from the blade. The strips were lined to make sure I get the best looking board. Glue was then applied, boards were clamped and left to dry. I wanted to show how I square up the ends of the slabs. I start by drawing a center line. This doesn't have to be perfect, but then use the square to mark the perpendicular lines on both ends. Using the laser on the miter saw, I line up the cut, then slowly cut through, making sure the slab doesn't move and pinch the blade. These slabs have a lot of pinholes that make for a cool appearance, but need to be filled, so I use brown CA glue. A couple passes were needed for some of the larger holes. A week later and I finally was back to working on the mini paddles. I started by using a carving knife to shape the blades. While this worked, it was a little difficult for me to have a good grip, so I decided instead to use the spindle sander. This proved to be much easier to control the shape of the hand grip and the blade. Using my mini hand plane, I worked to flatten out the blade. Clamping to the edge of the bench worked out well. This was followed up with block sanding to work the transition into the shaft. Next, I needed to make the square shaft round. Using sandpaper, I slowly rotated the paddle while working down each edge until it rounded out. Lastly, I applied a couple coats of gleam varnish. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, help me out by hitting that subscribe button. There are a lot of new projects coming up. Thanks.